Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Take Flight Podcast, episode number 134, with your four hosts, Daniel Johnson, Oluwakanola, Pabilo Timbo, and I, Shuel Ahmed. Now, from the title, you'll see it is one of our Take Flight Talks episodes, where we interview thought leaders and trailblazers, sharing with us their journey and expertise on how they've been able to take flight in their respective arena. Now, in case you've missed any of our previous Take Flight Talks interview episodes, by this point, you really have no excuse. You've missed out on interviews with leaders from various industries, from healthcare to nonprofits, from entrepreneurs in the real estate space to pioneers in the music industry and leaders in angel investing. So please, please, please make sure to check them out if you have not already done so. But back to today's episode. Now, we've categorized episodes in the past as special and very special, but this one goes beyond that, would even go as far as to say this is a historic episode, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we use the word historic as we have our first ever female leader on the show with us today. And with it being the first, we wanted to make sure we start with the very best of the best. So it's our honor to welcome Miss Yvonne Bajela. Now, Yvonne is a young woman excelling in multiple areas of life. Now, in recent times, she's been known as an early stage investor, as well as a founding member of Impact X Capital, a UK-based venture capital fund which invests in companies led by underrepresented entrepreneurs. Now, prior to this, Yvonne's track record speaks for itself. During the last 10 years, she has invested over £200 million in various startups across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, including Flutterwave and Marshmallow, and most notably investing in a company called Wise, formerly known as TransferWise, which was the first technology company to go public on the London Stock Exchange via a direct listing in 2021 for a $7 billion valuation. Now, on top of everything I've already mentioned, Yvonne is also a board member and a passionate leader, recognized as an advocate for increasing diversity in entrepreneurship and leadership. Through her work, she has been recognized by some of the world's leading business publications such as Forbes, Management Today, and the Financial Times, as well as being placed on coveted lists such as Forbes Under 30, Top 8 Female Venture Capital Investors to Watch, Top 25 Leading Black British Business People to Follow, Top 50 of Europe's Most Influential Women in the Startup and Venture Capital Space, and Top 10 Tech Entrepreneurship Voices to Follow in Instagram. Now, in any case, if we stop there, we are already way ahead of the curve based on anyone's metrics. But also to mention last and most definitely not least, Yvonne is a wife and last summer became a mother for the first time to a beautiful baby boy who I'm sure will be very proud of everything his mother is doing, especially when he listens back to this episode in the future. So today, we'll be deep diving Yvonne's journey from her younger years to becoming a founder and an early stage investor today, as well as learning about everything from her mission to the VC process and tips and recommendations for all you flyers out there looking to take flight. Now, let's get started with this historic episode and hit the music.
Take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
Intro.
Right, Yvonne, welcome to the Take Flight podcast. As you can probably tell from the introduction and from the round of applause, we are all very excited to have you on. Now, the audience would have heard an intro at the beginning of the episode, but how would you, Yvonne, describe your journey in your own words?
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with you guys. Such a big fan of your podcast. Just starting off with my journey, I actually went to uni with some of you guys, which was a great experience, studied economics and finance. But even before that, right back to the very beginning, from when I was much younger, my dad, actually at the age of 8, I would just sit at home on weekends and I'd read The Economist and Financial Times when I really wanted to be out playing with other children. And I feel as if that really did instill in me the world of finance, financial markets. And it almost made me believe that I could change the world from a financial perspective very early on. I was always good with numbers. So when I was younger, me and my dad used to play like number games. We'd play the abacus and he made it seem really fun. So whereas most children were like, oh, I hate maths, I used to be like, I love maths.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was a bit of a weirdo when I was younger, but I guess it's got me to where I am today. So when I went to university, I knew that I wanted to study economics because it's pretty much all I'd known, as I was really good with numbers. And studied economics and finance. And I guess at the time, a lot of people were on my course were speaking about banking. So I thought, great, that's definitely what I'm going to do. Hadn't really considered any other paths, to be honest, and managed to secure a role at Goldman Sachs. Obviously, my parents were super proud of me. But then, starting off at Goldman Sachs, I have to say it's like an amazing place to start your career, because in terms of the foundation they give you, the training, but I knew from very early on that it's not what I wanted to do. So my parents weren't very happy when I told them that I wanted to leave. I remember that day so clearly. They were like, "Why? Yvonne, why? What's he doing?" They were like, "You've got this job, you can stay there, you can make it to director." But I was like, "No." And I guess that stemmed from quite early on, really, because I guess one thing about Brunel, which is where I studied, is I feel like everyone is just like really hustlers. Like everyone that I know that's been there, like you just have this hustle culture. And I knew within myself that, okay, I can work at Goldman's, but what's the worst that can happen? Let me try out new things. I can always fall back on Goldman's. And so I'll say that I've always been a bit of a risk taker. And it's me being a risk taker that's led to me getting where I am today, because I've had multiple career paths. Started out in banking, went into strategy consulting, went into strategy consulting for insurance companies initially, then went into doing it for, big corporates such as De Beers Group. And it wasn't until the summer of 2013 when I went to Ghana where I really learned about the world of VC. And that's where I came back to London and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Yvonne, that was I mean, there's so many threads there for us to pull, from being nurtured, the interest and talents from a young age, to then jumping into one of the biggest brands in the globe was for the early years, and then having the courage to actually decide, actually, do you know what, this isn't what I want to do, but I want to try something else. So I think there's so many threads that we're probably going to pull in the conversation. I mean, we have a lot of questions on behalf of our listeners and on the podcast, but maybe Daniel, you can kick us off with the first question.
Yeah, sure. Yvonne, you mentioned about VC and investment banking as you introduced what your career, and just thinking, how has the transition been moving, and also what have the challenges been, and also what have you been surprised by positively?
Yeah, so I guess like when I worked in investment banking, it was kind of like my first real office job. Before that, I'd worked in retail, so I had jobs at H&M, had jobs at I remember my first job was like Sainsbury's. I was like an online shopper. I used to pick people's online shopping. And so working at Goldman's, I have to say it's like probably the best training ground in terms of the level of training they give for new grads and so on. So that I definitely took away from there. But I guess for me, like I always felt like I didn't belong. I mean, I was one of very few females, one of very few Black females in particular. I didn't really buy into the whole let's go out for drinks on Friday, because I don't drink really. I mean, I do drink socially, but it's not really what I want to do on a Friday night. And so I found it really challenging, to be honest. I had a great mentor at the time, and she would encourage me and say, Yvonne, like you really have to integrate with the team, go out to the Friday drinks. And I was like, nah, I'm good, thanks. So I found that quite challenging, actually. And one thing about me as well is in banking, like you're kind of taught back then, especially, you're kind of taught to like be really aggressive and really forthcoming and loud. And that's not me at all. Like, I pride myself on being like empathetic. And during my time there, I used to think to myself, is there something wrong with me? Like I should be more assertive. I should be more this. I should be more that. And it wasn't until like I left there and I found what worked for me. So the world of venture capital, for example, empathy is really a superpower. I work with entrepreneurs all the time. Like building a business is incredibly hard. So when my entrepreneurs come to me at the end of the day and they're like, I just want someone to talk to, I want someone that I can vent to, that empathy is actually so important. And so I guess for me, it's like I tried my stint in banking, didn't really enjoy it, but I've found what works for me. And it's only because I was willing to take that risk that I realized actually this is what I love doing. Had I have just stayed in banking, maybe I wouldn't have, thrived at it, because, I truly love what I do now.
Following on for that, Yvonne, you mentioned how investment banking is a very male-dominated sort of space. Moving over to VC, that's also really a male-dominant space as well. If I think about some data, right, female founders make about 2% of the capital that's invested. Can you walk through sort of your mission, how you're sort of trying to tackle that, and some of it, the experiences, because I'm sure you've got a ton of experiences with sort of in that male-dominated space?
Oh yeah, I've got stories for days, but
Don't mention any names, but
no, no, no.
But you don't need to mention the names, Yvonne, but we've definitely got time for the stories. So you feel
100%.
No, so definitely, I think for me, when I fell into this space, I realized very early on when I was working at Mitsui that, like you said, there's a huge disparity in funding that goes to women, but also by race as well. So even if you look at Black founders, they get less than 1% of capital on a global basis. But if you think about the global venture capital world, the industry has funded some of the most successful companies. So think of Amazons of the world, think of Google's, Facebook. These are all companies that in the early days were funded by venture capitalists. And so venture capital industry has so much power to play in building the companies of the future. And the way I really like to think of it is, if we truly want the world to be representative of, the entire society of where we live, we need to have, women getting funded, Black entrepreneurs getting funded. And that's where I come in. So if you look at the data, there's so much data that suggests that, women are 2 times more likely to invest in women entrepreneurs, same way that, me as a Black investor, I'm more likely to gravitate more towards Black founders, because people resonate more with people who are from similar backgrounds, which is why we have this, bias within the industry. And so whereas in banking, for example, where I felt very lonely, actually, it's my superpower in this industry that I'm in, because I'm able to tap into my networks and, meet with incredible entrepreneurs who are able to deliver incredible results. And there's been so many examples of companies that I have invested in where, maybe some VCs have maybe overlooked them, and then they go on to do really well. And it's like, damn, we missed out on that. And I'm like, yeah, you did. And so, yeah, I definitely see it as a superpower. And, I really love the industry that I'm working in. I feel as if there's this huge disparity, but at the same time, I see it as a huge opportunity. So many people talk about, this gap in funding, but it's a huge opportunity. And for those that are going to tap into it, there's so much potential there.
It's a great segue to the next question, Yvonne. Today you're sitting with your team. Help us understand what you look for in startups when making that investment, right? Or is it the founders themselves? So, how do you make that assessment? What the due diligence process? And do you have maybe a set of principles that you apply when looking to make an investment?
I'm going to get my notepad so I can take some notes of these investment tips.
Just watch it back. You can just watch it back.
Yeah, Olu, Olu's just long in oil and gas anyway, so we can keep it simple.
I'm happy right now. I know
you are. You're up.
For now.
For now.
Yeah, no, definitely.
He's happy now. Wait till you put on your turtleneck.
Yeah, Yvonne sent you a warning. She sent you a warning, slidey. So you got me between the lines.
No, but definitely. So I invested at the very early stages. I have done a bit of later stage investment as well. But where companies come to me where they just have an idea, for example, it's really about the team, because at the end of the day, you can think something is a great idea, but it's only the market that's actually going to dictate that. So the team at the early stage is so, so important, because like I said, building a company is incredibly hard. There's going to be hurdles along the way. There's going to be bumps and roadblocks. And it's so important that one thing I always look for is almost like an obsessive passion to solve a problem. Just to give you an example, I had a company that I met with, an entrepreneur that I met with operating in the supply chain space. Now, supply chain is not really it's not very interesting, right? But this entrepreneur, the way he was so passionate about solving, issues within supply chain, it spilled over that after the meeting, I went away and wanted to spend like hours just digging into supply chain, wanting to understand the industry more, because he was so passionate about the problem. And so when I'm looking at, companies, I'm really looking at the founders, what they bring to the table, whether they have an X factor. So have they worked in the industry before? That gives them that deep domain knowledge. Do they have like a first-hand experience of the pain that they're trying to solve? Are they like really passionate and obsessive about solving the problem? Are they able to bring on board a great team as well? Because, it's not a one-man band. You're going to have to build it out with a team, So these are all key things that I look for. But beyond that as well is the market large enough? Because as venture capitalists, we are looking for those billion-dollar outcomes, and the market has to be big enough. But sometimes, a lot of the times, actually, venture capitalists get it wrong. I mean, when Uber started out, no one knew that there was a billion-dollar market, right? A multi-billion-dollar market. And oftentimes, for those really successful outcomes, they do get underestimated. But it's really just trying to have a view on, is this market big enough? Is this the right founder? Is the timing right as well? And timing is really important, because if you look at the Facebooks of the world, or if you look at Google, there were so many, search engines before Google. Google delivered a much better product, and the timing was right. And so that's also another key factor.
So then maybe Yvonne, to build a bit on Olu's question that he had earlier in terms of the VC space and people of color, etc., not getting access to funding, or even people of a certain gender. So nowadays there is more people of color and females, etc., having this conversation, talking about investing. I mean, you're setting a great example in the industry that you're in, the way that you've been recognized. But is there anything more that we can do? And what advice would you give to startups who are looking to get more capital to them as an underrepresented founder?
Yeah, I would say just obsess on the product and your customers, because at the end of the day, if you build something that people really love, then the money will follow. I feel as if there's quite a misconception in the media where you see companies that have raised 20 million or 100 million and they have no product, right? But actually, those are so far and few between. Actually, a lot of companies that do go on to raise, they have maybe like an MVP, or they've gone out and validated the product or service that they want to offer. And so I would say just go out, do the work, really just prove that this is something that customers need, love, and want, and then the money will 100% follow. Deliver value, essentially.
Perfect. And for the listeners out there with a minimum viable product, if you're looking for investors, you know where to find Yvonne as well. So
I'm here.
Before I go to, because I've got quite a couple of questions, but I think that's looking at it from a startup point of view. If someone wanted to get into VC, right? We've got some listeners who have just graduated or just started their career, and they might potentially want to go down the VC route. How do you do that, right? How's that possible?
I do have to say, like, getting into VC is like super competitive. It's crazy. And one of the reasons is because a lot of VC firms, they don't have more than 10 people that work within their teams. And so you're competing for one of so few roles, right? Also, things have changed a lot since I joined the industry back in 2015, where a lot of the roles weren't advertised. It was literally through network. A lot more VCs have opened up now. For those wanting to break into the industry, I would suggest acting like a VC before you become a VC. So by that, I mean, start investing. If you want to maybe train as an angel investor. So there's angel investing school, for example, run by Andy AM. So you can get to know how to actually invest, maybe even invest yourself. You can invest. You don't have to have large sums of money to invest in a company. That's a huge misconception. I mean, I've done investments as low as £1,000. So that's one key area. Develop a thesis. So one of the things that you will be asked in interviews when you go to, interview for VC roles is, what's your thesis? What do you believe in? What sectors do you think are really hot at the moment? What excites you? And so you need to start formulating your view on the world. So for anyone that wants to break into VC, it's really important that you're intellectually curious as well. So you need to keep up to date with what are the key trends that are emerging. Things are constantly changing. And just connect with VCs as well. You'll be surprised, message people on LinkedIn, just say, hey, I'd love to learn a bit more about what you're doing. There's so many, my friend June, for example, she runs a VC, emerging VC community on WhatsApp, where individuals that want to break into VC are in that group. They share links. She shares roles with them. There's VC fellowships as well that you could potentially join, Include VC. There's Newton Venture Program as well, run by Local Globe. There are so many different things that individuals can do, as well as books to read, such as Venture Deals and so on. I feel like it's a lot easier today than it was back when I started out back in 2015. There's so many resources online.
So you mentioned what steps someone could do to break into the VC arena, but what skills would you say they need to sharpen or need to possess to be successful?
100% intellectual curiosity. So I find myself sometimes at 3 a.m. just digging deep into a 50-page paper on Web3. You have to, that's 100% one of the key skills required. You have to be really a people okay, so I'm not necessarily a people person. I'm actually quite introverted, but it's a really network driven industry where on a weekly basis, today, for example, I've had 5 meetings. you're constantly meeting with people, whether it's investors, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's, you know, potential hires for your companies that you've invested in. You're constantly speaking to people and building relationships. And so if that's not something you're comfortable with, get comfortable with it. I've managed to do it. You can do it if you really want to work within the industry. Another thing, I wouldn't say it's like an absolute requirement because it's something that you can learn, but get comfortable with, you know, numbers, get comfortable with financial statements and so on. I mean, I have individuals that I work in the industry with that have come from being doctors and marketeers. Like there's no one path to breaking in the industry, but I would say that they're some of the key traits that you should have.
Just on that point, Yvonne, you mentioned the word superpowers. You spoke a little bit about skills needed to sort of thrive in that space. You've almost been training, right, since the age of 8 into sort of being prepared for this kind of arena. What would you say would be your superpowers that you need for the next 10 to 15 years in this VC space?
Yeah, so again, I think like the industry is so network driven, right? And so even when I invest in a company, already we're thinking, okay, when are you going to raise your next round? And which investors am I going to be able to connect you with? So building those relationships is so important across the board. Remaining intellectually curious as well, I think is super important. I think that when you break into the industry, you can kind of get a bit relaxed, like, okay, you've broken into the industry, but you still need to like have that hunger to learn more all the time because trends change. Like a couple of years ago, AI was the hot thing. Now it's like Web3 and there's like all these Web3 startups and you kind of have to always stay on top of it. And so for me, it's like finding and crafting out the time in order to do that, as well as like having meetings with my existing portfolio companies, managing my family, my son, and so on. Like it can be a real challenge, but it's something that's so important. And also empathy, like I said, it's so important within this space because at the end of the day, when I invest in the company, that relationship is going to be for like 10 years. So you want to get along with the investors that are investing in your company. So again, that's something else that's super important. And also access, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about what deals you can get into. That's what makes you a great investor. So again, it's I guess that ties in with relationship as well, right? Because the deals that you come across to some extent are stemming from the relationships that you have as well.
100%.
We've got a couple of fathers on the podcast, right? You're a newly mother. How are you finding balancing all those hats? Because I'm always intrigued when it comes to people that are doing so many things. I could not imagine how you balance all those hats. So what are some tips for the listeners? What areas are you even struggling with maybe? But yeah.
Okay, this is something that might sound quite controversial, but I don't actually believe there's such a thing as balance, right? I feel as if you almost have to, at some point in time, like there may be a period of time where I have to pour all of myself into, you know, working on the deal. And then there's a period of time where I really want to focus on my son and make sure I give him the time and fully dedicate myself to that. So it's really about like shifting around my schedule and finding moments to do and care for and be with the people that I love, and, you know, whilst also being able to do the things that I love, which is work within the space, work with entrepreneurs. So it's a constant rebalancing act, but I wouldn't say there's this constant level of balance because sometimes I have to pour more into different areas of life, if that makes sense.
I love that.
Yeah, 100%.
P would agree with that.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at our career so far, we never ever achieved balance. It was, you know, it's sort of extremes, right? If you're you know, working hard at work, endless nights, and then there's periods where it's just 100% family. So it's the word that I've come to sort of resonate with is more harmony. But trying to search for balance is impossible. And when you realize that, things get a lot easier because now it's sort of an understanding, acceptance. I just try to find harmony. But if you have an understanding spouse that understands these sort of peaks and troughs in your journey forward, it makes a big difference. And I'm sure Yvonne can attest to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, you know, when people say they have a tribe, like I would not be able to do what I do without my tribe. Like, I'm sure all of you that do have children can attest to the fact that, you know, raising children is not an easy job at all. And it really does take a tribe. So I'm very fortunate that I have an incredible support system. So my mom, my sister, my husband, when I'm out during the week, like I said, it's a really network driven industry that I'm in. So when I'm out during the week, he's the one that's like putting my son to bed and so on. It's really about us making it work for the two of us. And so I'm super grateful that I have that support. And so, yeah,
Um,
what I would say is like your partner in life is so, so, so important.
Got a cup of tears here. You need to
Yvonne,
let's change
Yvonne, can you say
another
that
new
again for
question.
the listeners?
Yeah, new question. I'm just get emotional. Come on.
Can you say that again? Say that again for the listeners.
for some of our technical listeners, right now we're in a bear market. We're
Yeah.
seeing a lot of corrections in the public market, the private market when it comes to valuation. What's your impression? What's your views? What do you expect to see in the future for the people that are not invested in oil and gas? For the other folks,
I think just to add some context to Ollie's question for the listeners who may not be watching this. Ollie was asking that question with the biggest smile right now because his portfolio is just all green because he's just oil and gas long. But Yvonne,
for now.
Up until Ollie
He doesn't know what to, he doesn't know what
move
move to make next. That's the thing.
I've sold
He doesn't.
some.
Just because. He doesn't.
But yeah, what's your views on it?
Yeah, so this is something like we're constantly discussing with the companies that we work with, because public markets always do end up having an impact on private markets. And so it's really, really affecting private markets at the moment, although it is a lagged effect. I personally, as an economist, think we're heading for a recession. I think all the signs are pointing to that. I mean, 1 in 7 people are skipping meals in the UK. Then you have like 25% less fuel purchases here in the UK as well. The inflation environment is really, really hitting people's purses. And so I think we're heading for a recession, but at the same time, right? And, yes, it's going to be really hard on people, and I fully empathize with that fact. But also we have to look at the opportunity that comes from it, like public, you invest in like property, right? And, it could be some great opportunities that emerge from that. Same way in the world that I'm in. If you look back at 2008, where we had the huge financial crisis, right? The market completely crashed. Some of the greatest companies were actually birthed during that period. So if you look at Uber, if you look at Instagram, these are companies that all emerged within that period. And actually, like, people can say, like, over the last few years, valuations have just, really, really creeped up so high. So I almost feel as if it's like refreshing the market. And so valuations are going to calm down a bit. Things are going to stabilize, and personally I think that the most incredible entrepreneurs are going to continue to build, and we're going to have some really exciting companies emerge from this period as well. And so I always like to say that yes, we're heading for a really challenging period, but people should also look for the opportunity within the storm as well.
Love that. So maybe I can jump in with a question, Yvonne. So I think listening to your background and your story, there's been examples where you have, in a certain extent, taken flight, right? You've jumped from a situation that maybe on paper would have been great, and you could have stayed in that career or path for a long time, but you've decided to take that jump and take flight. My question to you is that there could be some of our listeners out there who also maybe in a comfortable job, maybe in a comfortable relationship, maybe in an area where they're afraid to take that jump, or they're afraid to see what's around the corner. Now, in your case, during those moments where you have taken that jump, what are the factors that you thought about, and what was the environmental factors that maybe helped that or made it challenging for you?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to share an example with you. So when I joined Mitsui, Japanese investment company, my first stint into the world of VC, I had no experience in direct investing in companies. I was tasked to come in and lead a team. Meanwhile, I don't know anything about investing. And and I was like, God, why are you doing this to me? Like, at the same time, like, I had a friend and he was just like, look, these opportunities only come by once in a lifetime. And at the end of the day, like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, I have prior experience. I've worked in investment bank, and I can always fall back on that and get another job. And that's the kind of mindset that I have. So even now, I always ask myself, what's the worst that can happen? Like, seriously, if you're in a job at the moment, you're thinking about starting a company, you want to move to a new role, you want to completely change careers, do it. Like, life is short at the end of the day. And what is the worst that could happen? Okay, it doesn't work out. You just go back to the industry that you were in before, and there's still going to be jobs there. Yes, you might have to hustle your way back in, but there is always fallback. And I just feel as if more people should take risks. One thing that I really, really believe in life is taking calculated risk. And I feel as if it's the risk that I've taken by having multiple career paths that got me to where I am today. And in life, if you don't take risks, the rewards are limited at the end of the day. So you just have to get comfortable with taking risk and just knowing that our minds are the one is this thing that often limits us, right? Because we set up scenarios. Oh, if I leave, it's not going to work out. If I leave, I'm not going to make any money. I'm not going to make enough money. But what if it does work out? What if it does actually work out? And so we need to like get comfortable with being uncomfortable and just go for the things that we want in life.
So Yvonne, maybe just to double click on that a little bit more as well. So you explained the experience with your parents, for example, right? And this is something that maybe people from underrepresented backgrounds, that they're challenging the expectations from parents of an old world versus these opportunities that we see in the new world. So how was that experience of informing your parents that actually I wanted to take this jump in this particular space that maybe may not be as established as our parents' generations would think? How was that conversation? How has that helped you throughout your career since?
Oh, it wasn't easy. I had like ongoing headache for a while because actually, like when I left banking, I went traveling for a bit as well, and so they just didn't understand. They were
So
like,
they
"What?"
thought, right, okay.
They were like, is she coming back?
What? Like,
Therefore, like Yvonne's ready to retire already. Way too
they're
soon.
like, "What's going on, my child?" Like, but actually, I just feel as if, you know, they won't get it, and not everyone's going to get the decisions you make in life. And now, like, so my dad passed away 3 years ago, but now my mom's always like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." But actually, if I stayed in that role, like at the end of the day, I'm still her child. She's still going to be proud of me, regardless of, okay, not in every circumstance, but you know, like
Parents will disown you if they need
exactly.
to. In African culture.
There's always a limit. There's always a limit.
I've been threatened a few times to be disowned.
But I honestly do believe that, you know, sometimes you just have to do what's right for you and do what like sets your soul on fire. And if that means that you have to let people down in the process, then do that. At the end of the day, like do what you're passionate about, do what is gonna make you happy. You can't live life just thinking and trying to please other people, even if that is your parents. So sorry, parents, if you're listening to this and you're not happy with this advice. But at the end of the day, like I'm so happy that I didn't let their disappointment in me at the time limit me, because look at where it's got me today, right? And so I think it's really important that people stop thinking about pleasing others and trying to live life for others and live life on your own terms.
And I said this in the last episode that we recorded, that it's so important that we as the young generation take more leaps of faith, because with the right intention and the commitment to work an opportunity, it always works out in the end, right? So we should have more belief and more faith to what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, like even if you look at the most successful people in the world, like think about Bezos, like how many times did he fail before he got to where he was? So we also have to get comfortable with failing, because like I said, what's the worst that can happen? You can go out there, say you want to start a company, it doesn't work out. Okay, go and get a job and try again. Like it's not the end of the world. One thing that I think has really helped me is whenever I face moments of adversity or challenges, I always think to myself, okay, this time will pass and there will be better times ahead. So I never ever fall into this hole of like letting situations limit me. And I think that really helps in making me, even like where I need to have difficult conversations. So last week I had a really, really difficult conversation with someone. And before it, I was like, oh, I really don't want to have this conversation. But I was like, it passed and the conversation went really well. So I feel as if like we need to just go into things and just get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because those billionaires, that's what they're doing daily.
Question. You mentioned you ended the sentence with billionaires, and the thing that comes to mind actually, this saying is ringing in my head as for my next question. For you, yesterday's price is not today's price, and every investment that you make, your price is going up. And I have a question around as you are making more, every investment you make, I guess the sums are going up. Do you feel the pressure as you start to sort of invest larger amounts in startup companies? Or are the fundamentals of how you assess a company still the same? How does that feel, right? Because I'm sure at some point very soon you'll be looking at the $1 billion transaction in one go, right? So how do you navigate through that?
So I have made some losses within the space. I'll be very open with that, but actually I've learned the most from my losses. I feel as if the fundamentals do remain the same. I'm always interested in knowing like who is the team, regardless of whether the company's fresh, no product service live in the market or not. At the end of the day, like the people that are going to execute and deliver on the vision is something that stays consistent throughout the journey. And also, I guess, as a company becomes more established and is later stage, then there's a lot more historical data that I can rely upon as well. So I can look at how the company has done historically. I can look at, their forecasts and look at their historicals and see whether that's a likely scenario. I can speak to, customers, do reference calls. So there's more data points, but at the end of the day, this team is still crucially important in terms of executing the vision for the future.
Just to build on that, Yvonne, as well, in terms of when you're looking at businesses to invest in and entrepreneurs in the team, I think this is something that you've really mentioned: empathy to understand the situation, relationship building, networks, and it really boils down to the team, and that even boils down to maybe one or two key individuals within that team. Based on what you see, how important is it for founders of a business to have a technical background, for example? I think people have this perception, especially in the tech side, that you need to have someone in the team that codes or a CEO that knows how to code. How much do you look at that technical component when you look at potential businesses to invest in?
I mean, 100% helps, because at the end of the day, the majority of companies that I invest in are tech companies. And so the technology is the underlying piece, and having someone that can manage that internally is really helpful, because otherwise companies end up outsourcing to, Eastern Europe or wherever it may be. And managing that process can be really costly. It can become really challenging. If you're not technical, then you often aren't able to manage that process either. And so it just becomes really, really costly. Whereas if you have someone internally, they can manage that on your behalf. They can really drive that process and ensure everything's working out okay. So I think it's really, really important. And, if you're not necessarily a technical individual yourself, I wouldn't say you need to go out there and learn how to code. I think it's just about, finding technical people to join your team. And so as an entrepreneur, you're constantly selling. You're selling to investors. You're selling your vision to investors. You're selling to customers. You're selling to potential team members to buy into your vision. And so you have to be great at selling.
Yvonne, question. When you sort of have your reflective moments and you take a step back and you kind of, look at the world in your lens, I'm interested to understand, what do you think we need more of in terms of the world? Do we need better teams, better products? Do we need more startups, or do we need less founders, but people that more work for startups? What's maybe your thoughts on what we need to create more impact in this world today?
I wish that we would, first of all, two things. So I wish that, access to funding. So if you look at the fundraising ecosystem, right? There's so much capital, like trillions of dollars have gone into companies. And I see a world where that's more equally distributed. Because like I said, if we want to truly build products and services that cater to the society, we need, the funding to go to entrepreneurs from all backgrounds. And so that's one thing, and I think we really need, because that's where we have like so much bias in the world, or you have these advertising campaigns which turn out to be racist, and we're like, who's on their board? Right. Why is this allowed to happen? Right. And then another thing, I would really love to see a world where, for example, more women get into the world of STEM, for example, and more women are able to see more role models within the technology space and know that, yes, I can build $1 billion tech company. I think that we are going to see more of that, and I cannot wait for that to happen.
Just before we start to wrap up, guys, any other questions from the rest of the crew?
It's not really a question, but a statement, right? Is if you do predict a recession, I think what happens typically in recessions is a lot of people will lose their jobs and potentially will move into startup companies, right? Either starting companies that solve different problems or actually working for startups, because right now it's such a competitive space when it comes to recruitment, where the top companies like Google, Facebook, Apple take most of the talent. But if there is a recession, potentially hiring will be easier for these startups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Do you agree or disagree with that, Yvonne? Because you're welcome to disagree with Olu.
I think that one of the key challenges that, startup space is access to talent, like you just said, right? And access to funding. The talent piece is really, really challenging. I mean, I was speaking to a chief engineer the other day, and she was saying how everyone she hires, she has to try and pay them double so that they won't get poached by another company. So it's really, really fierce. But like, so many companies are now doing layoffs. Klarna announced today that they're laying off 10% of their staff, right? Netflix have already announced that they're cutting staff. Like, so many tech companies are doing, layoffs, and that creates opportunities. The market's going to be less competitive for talent. And I believe that a lot of people as well that, do work within these companies will go on to start companies, like Olu said. So this should be really exciting times, like I said, 2008, so many incredible companies were birthed during that period. And I believe that we'll see the same again during this difficult economic environment.
We've got this
It's been a while since I've
podcast
come through.
that you could potentially invest on. In case we've got a business opportunity.
No, I give Olu claps because I wasn't even thinking in that space. But go ahead, Olu, continue. You haven't finished pitching. Continue.
I'm just saying, so we got this. Huh?
Send the deck.
Guys,
I'll
I feel
send
like
you over the deck.
Olu, I feel like we're looking at this the wrong way. The whole time that I was thinking and listening to Yvonne's story and expertise, I was thinking that, Yvonne, in the future, if you're on a cap table and there's even a little bit of space for 4 guys to come swoop in with a little angel investment or any type of investment, Take Flight Podcast LLC would be happy to swoop in and just help.
There's always opportunity.
Yeah, there's just Take Flight, the podcast LLC. We'll be happy to slip into that cap table if you give us the honor. But you let us know.
I don't think you heard what P said. Yesterday's price is not today's price. So we might not be able to.
You should have been holding Yvonne a couple of years ago. Today
I have faith. But then if there's any other final cues, otherwise, Yvonne, I think that's a very inspiring message to leave us with before we go into the final 5 round. And looking forward to Take Flight Podcast co-investing with any of your future billion-dollar investments in the future. And anything on your end that you wanted to share before we go into the final 5?
No. That's it for now.
All good. Ready? So, Yvonne, these are our quick 5 fire round questions that we ask all our guests. And let's go. So, first question: worst piece of advice you've received?
That I should stay in a role because it's safe and like the pay is good, and I can climb up the ladder.
Whoever said that piece of advice, I have to thank you if you're listening to this episode, because thank you for giving Yvonne the fuel to jump further. Question number 2, Yvonne: best piece of advice you've received?
To take calculated risks, especially in my 20s. I remember one of my mentors said that to me, and she was like, you don't have any commitments, like what have you got to lose? And that's carried on through even into my 30s, where I'm not afraid to take risk. And like Pablo said earlier, it does actually pay off if you're consistent and you keep delivering. It always pays off. And even if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world.
Love it. There's always, as Pablo also said, yesterday's price is not today's price. So we'll keep going up and to the right. Question number 3, Yvonne. So a piece of content that you're loving at the moment. This can be any form of media.
So I'm really big on like audiobooks and podcasts. I would say that for anyone interested in the VC space, 20-Minute VC is a really great podcast by Harry Stebbings. So give that a listen. Great.
And then of course, Take Flight Podcast is number 2 on that list.
Yes,
so I'm not going to...
I was just about to say that.
These guys are pushing hard today.
Wait, what? Guys, have you guys not...
I'm with you.
We have to always sell.
I'm with you, but we just didn't have that brief, before the episode started. I'm with you, but to me and Daniel have to play catch up.
So, penultimate question, Yvonne. Something that you're curious to learn more about at the moment?
The world of Web3. Even though crypto has been a bit of a roller coaster, I do feel as if I have to learn about the space. I think it's super interesting. There's so much to learn. I'm very keen to learn more about the space.
Great. And then the last but not least question: what does Take Flight mean to you?
Take flight is just, bet on yourself, take the risk, and don't be scared. Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Love it. Yvonne, thank you so much for your time. I think you can tell from all our expressions on our faces, we've learned a lot. And I think we've also been able to really enjoy this conversation. But I think I'll pass it over to Daniel.
Thanks, sure. And before I kind of close, Yvonne, where can people find out more about you? Any links to any websites, personal pages where they can find out more about what you do or connect with you, if you want to share that, please?
So Yvonne Bajela, Bajela, on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and my website as well.
Thank you for sharing. We'll be sure to tag those in our description notes of the episode and on our social media posts. But Yvonne, once again, on behalf of the four of us, thank you again for not only coming to share some great, valuable insights for us all, but also being the first female guest on our podcast.
First
So
of
thank
many.
you
I
once
hope.
again. And to all our
Historic.
listeners,
Historic.
First of many, yes.
Yes,
First of
yes,
many.
yes.
By the way, any female listeners out
First
there,
of
if you want to
many.
come on, you know where to find us. We'd love to have you on.
But you've got a lot to follow.
And you know the level you need to aspire to be. Yeah. It's been a pleasure. Once again, on behalf of everyone, thank you for all our listeners. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. We certainly have. As always, you can find us on Instagram at Take Flight Podcast. You can also watch our episodes on YouTube, searching Take Flight Podcast. Until next week, stay safe and God bless.
Take off, take flight with you. Yeah, for we never fly, but we're